Hello guys, welcome back. The topic that we are going to discuss today is the lungs. Okay. Now, as we all know, that lungs, they are a pair of respiratory organs which is located in our thoracic cavity. There are two lungs, the right lung and the left lung, which is separated by a mediastinum. Right? What is a mediastinum? The mediastinum is the space which is located in between the two lungs, right, in the thoracic cavity. If these are the two occupying lungs, the space in between these two lungs, which means this is the mediastinum. So there are two lungs, the right lung and the left lung in the thoracic cavity, separated by the mediastinum. Correct? Okay. Now, lungs are basically spongy in nature. They are basically spongy in nature. And in the young, they are grayish color or brownish in color. But as the young kid, they start growing, these lungs, they become motile black because of the inhaled carbon particles. Okay. At the beginning, they are usually brown or grayish in color, but as time passes, they become blackish in color because of the inhaled carbon. Okay. So let me first draw a diagram, and then I'll explain it to you. Okay. We have the trachea. This is the right lung, this is the left lung. Now a lung, it consists of an apex, right? We have an apex. Then we have a base over here. And we have two surfaces, right? The two surface, the costal and medial surface. Right. Now just imagine, if this is the lung, right? The lung is placed in this way. The costal part, this is the costal part which will be in relation to the ribs. Okay. So this is the costal part, and the part which is inside, right? The inner part, that will be the medial part. That is the middle surface. Right. So in this way, we have two surfaces. First one, we have the apex. You can see that the apex is blunt. It is not sharp. It is blunt. We have a base. And then we have two surfaces, the costal surface, which is in approximation with the ribs, and then we have the middle surface, which is on the inner part, which is towards the mediastinum. Right. Next we have the borders. We have three borders. The anterior border, this one, you can see it, this is the anterior border. We have the posterior border, which is on the posterior part, right? And then we have the inferior border, this one. Okay. So grossly, if we talk, a lungs, it consists of an apex, which is blunt in nature. Now one thing, this apex, it is situated roughly around 2.5 centimeters above the middle 1/3 of the clavicle. So it is situated somewhere in the neck, right? The apex, it is blunt, and it is situated around 2.5 centimeters above the middle 1/3 of the clavicle. It is covered by a membrane which is known as the suprapleural membrane, right? It is covered by a membrane which is known as suprapleural membrane. Also, it is covered by the cervical pleura, right? So it is covered by the apex. This apex is covered by the suprapleural membrane and the cervical pleura. Now what is this suprapleural membrane? Many times the invigilators used to ask. This suprapleural membrane is basically, the other name for suprapleural membrane is Simpson's fascia. Okay, it is known as Simpson's fascia. Suprapleural membrane is also known as Simpson's fascia, and this fascia or the suprapleural membrane is nothing but it is just the flattened tendon of scalenus minimus. Okay, Simpson's fascia is the flattened tendon of scalenus minimus. Okay, so the apex, which is blunt, and is covered by the suprapleural membrane and the cervical pleura, situated roughly around 2.5 centimeters above the middle one-third of the clavicle. Clear? Next, we have the base. The base, it rests on the diaphragm, right? So the base is actually separating the right lung from the right lobe of the liver, right? Now, if I draw a simple diagram, let me draw it over here. If this is the lung, the right lung and the left lung, here we have the liver, right? Here we have the liver, here we also have the stomach, right? We have the stomach, we have the spleen over here. So this is the spleen, this is the stomach, this is the liver. Okay? What the base does is, it separates the right lung, the base separates the right lung from the right lobe of the liver. We know that the liver is divided into two parts, or it has two lobes, the right lobe and the left lobe. So the base separates the right lung from the right lobe of the liver, and the base of the left lung separates the lung from the left lobe of the liver and the fundus of the stomach and the spleen. Clear? The base of the right lung separates the right lung from the right lobe of the liver. The base of the left lung separates the left lung from the left lobe of the liver, the fundus of the stomach and the spleen. Clear? Okay. Next, we have the surface. As it is clear, the surface which will be nearer or towards the ribs, right? If we look here, we have the ribs in this position. So the surface which is towards the ribs is known as the costal surface, the outer part. Okay, this is a costal surface. And the surface which is towards the mediastinum, towards the middle part, that is the middle surface. Now that middle surface is also divided into two parts. The middle surface is also divided into two parts. The surface, the middle surface, which is towards the vertebra, which is more towards the vertebra, will be known as the vertebral part. And the middle surface, which is more towards the mediastinum, will be known as the mediastinal part. Okay, very simple. We have two surfaces, the costal surface, which is towards the ribs, and the middle surface, which is towards the mediastinum. But the mediastinal surface, the middle surface, is also divided into two parts. The part which is more towards the vertebra will be known as the vertebral part, and the part which is more towards the mediastinum will be known as the mediastinal part. Okay, these are the surfaces. Next, let's look at the border. We have three borders. We have the anterior border, right? The anterior border is thinner and shorter as compared to the posterior border. The anterior border is straight. However, you can see that in the left lung, right? In the left lung, at the level of the fourth intercostal space, in the left lung, at the level of the fourth intercostal space, you can see that the anterior border is interrupted by a white notch, which is known as the cardiac notch, right? This is a cardiac notch. Now, as we all know, that heart, right, the main organ, the pumping organ, it is situated in between these two, the lungs, right? Heart is being given the protection that it requires, right? So the heart is tightly present in between the two lungs. However, this is the position where the heart is not covered. Okay, so the area that is near the cardiac notch, this is the area where the heart is not at all covered. Apart from this, the heart is fully protected by the lungs. It is under the covering of the lungs. Okay, under the protection of the lungs. So this is about the anterior border. The anterior border is short, thinner than the posterior border. It is straight. However, in the left lung, at the level of the fourth intercostal space, it is interrupted by a notch which is known as the cardiac notch. Clear? Simple? Next, we have the posterior border. The posterior border is basically ill-defined. Okay, it is present on the posterior aspect, as the name itself suggests, posterior border. It will be present on the posterior aspect. Okay, it is ill-defined and it extends from C7 up till T10. Okay, the posterior border, it is ill-defined. It is thicker than the anterior border, and it extends from C7 up till the T10. Okay. Lastly, we have the inferior border. This inferior border is separating the base of the lungs from the costal surface. Right. Now, if I draw another diagram, if I show you in this position, if this is the base, right, and this is the costal surface, so the inferior border is separating the base from the costal surface. Alright. So these are the three borders of the lungs: anterior border, posterior border, and the inferior border. Alright, the right lung is somewhat heavier and shorter. Okay, the right lung is heavier and shorter because here we have the liver. This liver is going to push the lungs, right? I mean the right lung. So the right lung is heavier, although it is heavier, but it is shorter as compared to the left lung. The left lung is narrower and longer. Okay. The right lung, if we talk about the difference between the right lung and the left lung, what are the basic difference? The basic difference are the right lung and the left lung. Okay? The right lung is approximately 700 grams in weight. The right lung is approximately 700 grams in weight, whereas the left lung is 50 to 100 grams lesser than the right lung, which means it is approximately 600 or 650 grams. Right? So the right lung is heavier than the left lung. Although, but even if it is heavier, it is, as compared to the size, it is shorter. Okay? It is shorter. Here, this is narrow and longer. Okay? The right lung, it is shorter and heavier. Left lung is narrower and longer. The right lung, as you all know, it consists of two fissures. The right lung consists of two fissures. One, we have the horizontal fissure, and the other one, we have the oblique fissure. Right. So right lung has two fissures, the horizontal and oblique fissure. Right. On the other hand, the left lung has only one fissure, that is the oblique fissure. Okay. Here we have only one fissure, the oblique fissure. Clear? Which means the right lung consists of three lobes, 1, 2 and the 3, the upper, the middle and the lower. On the other hand, the left consists of only two lobes, right? The upper and the lower. However, there is a small structure present on the left lung, right over here, right? There is a tongue-like structure. This tongue-like structure is known as lingula, and this lingula basically corresponds the middle lobe of the right lung. Okay, so these are some basic difference between the right lung and the left lung. Grossly, if we talk, the right lung, it is 700 grams, the left lung 600 grams. Right lung is shorter and heavier. The left lung is longer and narrower. The right lung consists of two fissures, which means it has three lobes. The left lung consists of only one fissure, which means it has two lobes. The right lung, the left lung, it has a small structure known as lingula, which corresponds to the middle lobe of the right lung. Okay? Apart from these differences, we all have the same. Both the lungs consist of an apex, it consists of a base, it has two surfaces, it has three borders. Okay? Apart from all these differences, we have similarities between the two lungs as well. Okay, so this is an outline or a gross structure of the lungs. Here, one of the most important topic in these lungs is the root of the lung, right? So many times there arises a question, draw a well-labeled diagram of the root of the lung. So today we will be discussing the root of the lung in a very short and a very simple way, okay? Alright. Now I will request you to please practice the diagrams, okay? It's very important, and if you know the diagram, it is going to be very easy for you. Alright, the root of the lung. Okay, what is the root of the lung? Now, this root of the lung is basically a short broad pedicel which is connecting the middle surface of the lung to the mediastinum. Simple as that. Okay. It is a short broad pedicel connecting. Now in the previous diagram, if you look at this simple diagram as well, if you look at this simple diagram, you know that the two lungs are connected to the trachea, right? So this trachea is connected on the middle surface of the lungs. It is not connected on the costal surface. It is not present on the outer surface, right? It is present on the inner surface. So the root of the lung is basically a short broad pedicel connecting the middle surface of the lungs to the mediastinum. This is the mediastinum, right? This whole space is known as the mediastinum. So connecting the middle surface of the lung to the mediastinum, right? Now, sorry. You are very familiar with a diagram in the textbook which looks somewhat in this position. Right? Oh, this is big. Right? There is a diagram in your BDC as well as in your Vishwamsing, the root of the lung. Now here, what you have to understand and what you have to know is all the structures which are present in the root of the lung, right? Basically the trachea, the arteries and the veins, you have to remember the position, right? You have to remember the arrangement, right? Okay, so always remember the diagram. If this is the right lung, okay, if this is the root of the right lung and this is the root of the left lung, right? Always remember this part, right? This area, it corresponds to the anterior border. Okay? This area corresponds to the anterior border and this part corresponds to the posterior border. Okay? This is the anterior border and this is the posterior border. Clear? Okay. Here we have a diagram which I have already drawn for the root of the lung in order to save time. Now this is the diagram which you can see in your textbooks as well. Now in this diagram, the main important thing is you have to remember the arrangement and the structures present in the right lung as well as the left lung. Okay? Alright, so this is the right lung and this is the left lung. Okay. Now since we have already told you, since we already know that this portion, right, this area, this is more towards the anterior part. So in the most anterior part you can see is the pulmonary veins. Now understand one thing. Veins are always to be drawn in blue color, but here we have drawn the veins in red color. Why? Because we know that veins, they carry deoxygenated blood in the body except in the lungs, right? We know this portion very well. Pulmonary veins are the only veins which carries oxygenated blood, and pulmonary arteries are the only arteries which carries deoxygenated blood, right? So in this particular diagram, the veins will be drawn in red color and the artery will be drawn in blue color, right? Which is opposite to the normal drawing colors, okay? And I would also like to apologize because I don't have the yellow marker. The plexus, which is basically the nerve plexus, which it has to be drawn in yellow color. Okay? Alright, so here First, let us look in the right lung. What are the structures present in the root of the lung of the right lung, right? So on the topmost portion, you can see that we have two bronchus, known as the ip arterial bronchus and the hyp arterial bronchus. So on the posterior most part, remember, the bronchus is present on the posterior part, right? On the posterior part. So on the posterior part, we have the bronchus. But here in the right lung, the bronchus, the principal bronchus is divided into two parts, the ip arterial and the hyp arterial. Why? Because we know that the trachea, before entering the right lung, it divides into two bronchus, right? So this is the main reason why we have two bronchus present on the right side. However, if you look at the left lung, you will see only one bronchus, that is the principal bronchus, because in the left lung, the trachea divides after entering the lung, right? But here, it is dividing before entering the lungs. That is why we have two bronchus. Okay? This is a major difference. Always remember this. So in the right lung, on the posterior part, you will see that we have two bronchus, the ip arterial bronchus and the hyp arterial bronchus. Just in front of the posterior part, that is the bronchus, in the midway, you will see that we have a pulmonary artery, which is drawn in blue color. Okay, and on the most anterior part, you can see that we have two pulmonary veins. So we have the superior pulmonary vein and the inferior pulmonary vein, right? And on the anterior part, we have the pulmonary plexus, the nerve plexus, the anterior pulmonary plexus, and on the posterior part, we have the posterior pulmonary plexus. So apart from this, what else do we have? We have the bronchial artery, right? We have the bronchial artery, and we have the bronchial veins, the vessels. We have some lymphatics over here. Okay, so the major difference in the root of the lung is we have two bronchus on the right side, but we have one bronchus on the left side, right? One pulmonary artery, one pulmonary artery, two pulmonary veins, two pulmonary veins. But here again we have one more difference. You can see that we have two bronchial arteries on the left side. Okay, two bronchial veins on the, two bronchial arteries on the left side and one bronchial artery on the right side. Clear? Okay. So here, this is the major difference. Okay, this diagram is very much important. You have to understand this, and you have to draw this diagram because this is one of the major topic, very important topic in lungs. Sometimes they ask only one question from the lungs, that is the root of the lung. So you have to answer properly. We have to draw a well-labeled diagram. The root of the lung is a broad, short pedicel connecting the middle section of the lung to the mediastinum. Right? It is formed by structures which are either entering, like the bronchus, which will be entering this part, right? And structures which are coming out, right? What are the structures coming out? The pulmonary veins, right? Okay. So this is a basic difference which you should understand in the root of the lung. Okay. The arterial supply to the lungs is through the bronchial arteries. We can see that there is one bronchial artery on the right side, two bronchial arteries on the left side. We have to understand that the two bronchial arteries that we have on the, the bronchial artery that we have on the right side, right? This is derived from the third posterior intercostal artery. Okay, it is derived from the third posterior intercostal artery, whereas the two bronchial arteries that you can see on the left lung is derived from the descending thorax. Okay, the descending thoracic aorta. This is derived from the third posterior intercostal artery, and this is derived, and both these two are derived from the descending thoracic aorta. The venous drainage is done by the bronchial veins. Usually there are two bronchial veins on both the sides. The right bronchial veins, they directly drain into the azygous vein, whereas the left bronchial veins, they drain into the hemiazygous vein. Okay. Next, if we look at the nerve supply of the lungs, right, we can see that there are two pulmonary plexus, right. So this lung is supplied by autonomic nervous system. That means the parasympathetic nerve supply is derived by vagus. Okay, parasympathetic is derived by vagus. What it does is, the vagus, it is secretomotor, right? It is secretomotor to the muscles of the bronchus, right? The muscle, the bronchial muscles which are present over here, what this vagus does is it provides stimulus to the muscle. Okay, it provides stimulus, or we can say it is motor. It is motor to bronchial muscles. It is motor to the bronchial muscles, right? Apart from this, the vagus is also secretomotor to the glands present in the bronchus. Okay, it is secretomotor to the glands present in the bronchus, and also it is responsible for stretch reflex and the cough reflex. Okay, the stretch reflex and the cough reflex that we have in the lungs, this vagus is responsible for it. So parasympathetic nerve supply is derived by vagus. The vagus is responsible, or it is motor to the bronchial muscles, and on stimulus, right, on stimulus of this vagus, what happens is the bronchospasms. Right, bronchospasms occurs when the vagus nerve is stimulated in the lungs. Also, it is secretomotor to the mucous glands, and yes, it is also responsible for the stretch reflex and cough reflex. So this is about the parasympathetic. The sympathetic, it is supplied by 2nd to 5th sympathetic ganglia. Okay, the parasympathetic, the sympathetic, right over here, is done by 2nd to 5th sympathetic ganglia. When this sympathetic nerve supply is stimulated, bronchodilation occurs. This is how the medicines for asthma works. Okay. All right. So this is about the nerve supply. What happens is the parasympathetic and the sympathetic nerves, first they form the pulmonary plexus. We have the anterior pulmonary plexus and the posterior pulmonary plexus. After these plexus have been formed, the nerves travel from here through these vessels into the lungs. Okay, this is how the nerve supply of the lungs works. Okay, so this is about the gross anatomy of the lungs, the root of the lungs, the blood supply and the nerve supply. Now we are left with one important topic, that is the bronchopulmonary segment. So now let's talk about the bronchopulmonary segment. Now as we know that we have 10 bronchopulmonary segments on each side, the right side as well as the left side. I've already drawn a diagram of the right lung and the left lung. In the right lung, as we all know that we have two fissures. We have the horizontal fissure over here and the oblique fissure over here. Right? Which means we have three lobes, the upper lobe, the middle lobe and the lower lobe. In this right section, you can see that we have 9 segments present over here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The 7th one, it is present on the middle side. Okay, and so I am showing you only the costal side, costal surface. The 7th one is present on the middle surface. So 6, the 7th one on the middle surface, 8, 9 and 10. So we have 9 segments on the front and 1 segment on the middle surface. Similarly here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, the 7th one on the middle, 8, 9 and 10. Okay, so each bronchopulmonary segment, these are anatomical and functional or surgical sectors of the lungs. Each one segment is aerated, well aerated by a tertiary or a segmental bronchus. And as from the diagram also you can see that this segment, they are roughly pyramidal in shape with its apex directed towards the root of the lung, right? Now here what I want to emphasize is, and which is very much important, is I have drawn 2 segments. Okay, I have taken 2 segments and I have drawn over here. Now you can clearly see in this 2 segment we have a bronchial vein, we have a bronchial artery, we have a bronchus. Bronchial vein, bronchial artery and a bronchus. This is an intersegmental arteriole. Okay, this is an arteriole. Again, I would like to apologize because here I have to use the green color because I've already used the red color for the bronchial artery. Okay, so this green color, it is also the bronchial, it is an arteriole. Okay, it is an arteriole. What I want to tell you and what you should remember is, you can see that in between these 2 segments, segment 1 and segment 2, in between these two segments, we have the pulmonary vein over here. Right, so this is a very important point. The pulmonary vein is intersegmental, which means one pulmonary vein can drain many segments and many segments has more than one pulmonary vein. In this segment you can see that there is 2 pulmonary veins. In this segment also you can see there are 2 pulmonary veins. Right, you should understand one thing, that this is not a bronchovascular segment. Right, this is a bronchopulmonary segment. Why is it not known as a bronchovascular? Because had it been a bronchovascular segment, each segment would have its own way. But here the situation is different. Each segment does not have its own way. Okay, that is why this is known as bronchopulmonary segment. Clear? Now if we look at this diagram, how is it divided? On the right side, we have the upper lobe, we have the middle lobe, and we have the lower lobe. I have written over here the upper lobe, the middle lobe, and the lower lobe. In the upper lobe, we have three segments, 1, 2, and 3. The apical, the posterior, and then the anterior. Right? Apical, posterior, and anterior. In the middle lobe, we have two portions. We have the lateral and the medial. And in the lower portion, in the lower lobe, we have 5 segments. We have the superior, the medial basal, the anterior basal, the lateral basal, and the posterior basal. Very simple. In the right lung, we have 3 lobes, upper lobe, middle lobe, and the lower lobe. So upper lobe, we have 3 segments, middle we have 2, and in the lower segment, we have 5. However, when we come to the left lobe, we know that in the left lobe, we don't have a middle lobe. I mean, in the left lung, we don't have a middle lobe because we have only 2 lobes, right? Upper lobe and the lower lobe. So here, it becomes a slightly different. Here, we won't have the middle lobe. In the left lung, we have only 2 lobes. We have the upper lobe and the lower lobe. But if you remember, in the beginning, I have told you that there is a structure known as lingula in the left lung, right? Near the lower than the cardiac notch. That lingula basically corresponds to the middle section or the middle lobe of the right lung. So here what happens is, in the upper lobe, we will have the lateral lingular segment and the medial lingular segment. Okay? So in this case, in the left lung, we have the apical, the posterior and the anterior. Next we have the lingular, 4 and 5 we have the lateral and the medial lingular. The 6, the superior, the medial basal, anterior basal, lateral basal, and the posterior basal. All the structures are same except that in the right lung we have a middle lobe. In the left lung we don't have a middle lobe, we have a lingular lobe. That is why it is included in the upper part. Okay, so this is a very important diagram and a very easy diagram. Just practice these 2 diagrams and this one, and it will be very easy for you. Right? I hope I have made the topic as simple as I can. And if there are any doubts, as usual, you can put in the comment box. Or if you want to see some improvement, please let me know. I will be very happy to know any problems that you are facing, and I will try to sort it out. Yeah. So thank you so much for watching.